Hi there, hope you're doing well. I thought I'd just start a video off. I kind of get an urge, the urge to herbal. As that old advert used to say. I've got the urge to herbal. I just was listening to a bit of a video about Alan Watts. That's Watt without the S, so not Alan Watts. There's also an interesting thinker, but Alan Watts, he's a Scottish guy. I think he lived in Canada. I think seemed to be out in the country somewhere, and I first encountered him, or heard him rather, just on the interwebs on YouTube, probably over 10 years ago. He's recently died a couple of years back, I think. I think he was a musician as well, but he kind of talked about what the world is, how he saw the world, how he saw like power constructs and what they might mean, how they might be interlinked, how we're being programmed by media, by so-called education, a whole host of things he did. Is Alan Watts, that's Watt. But I've just been recently found this channel, which is sort of someone who's collated all his writings and his videos and does an introductory, well, quite a long introductory, or well, not really introductory, it's kind of an analytical overview of some aspect of his thought and in relation to what's going on in the world now. And then usually plays one of Alan Watts's broadcasts, which were often. I think I have seen him like speaking to a camera, but a lot of them were audios. And so he was there quite early on in YouTube. I didn't know I was going to start this video talking about that, but I've been thinking about putting some tweets on the Twitter today, and I don't want to make statements that are untrue, but we're sort of grasping towards what the truth might be. And sometimes if you make a statement, it's heading towards the truth, or it's hinting at it, or ideally it would be an invitation for more revelation from another party, in this case, let's say Cheshire Police. In other words, if they were more and more open, then any misunderstandings we might have, if indeed we have any, about what their viewpoint is, about their way of going about things, is, if there were any misunderstandings, or not recognizing something that they've done and they have done, or that we think they've done something and they haven't done it, then their openness would help if we could trust their openness. But what we've got instead is just a complete blanking. And that usually happens when an individual or an organization just doesn't want to reveal anything, because they know that something's gone wrong and they've done wrong things, and there's a lot of focus on them, a lot of pressure on them to explain themselves, to justify what they've done in the light of what's been forthcoming over all this time since the convictions of Lucy Letby. So yeah, let me pause it. I saw a tweet by Martin Pittman. He said, and he was talking about the quote unquote silver killer cases. Well, I don't like that. Something about that. Not to do with him. That's just what these so-called cases are called. It's just sort of, and I know it's the title of a book, and I know it's something that, like the Camden Ripper, things like that. And I can imagine if you were the family of victims of, you don't like these kind of names and these labels that get attached to things. You think, no, I don't. That was my mum. That was my dad. The silver killer. What do you? Because they got grey hair, and it's all. No, but I was. It's just what it's been called, but the point of Martin's tweet was. I'm not saying anything against him because he's using that term, because that's what the common parlance is about these cases. But I'm just making a point about how terrible crimes get these kind of labels, and I suppose we all use them, probably do. this idea of the Ripper, the Camden Ripper was, God knows anyway, that was... It's ways that people sell newspapers initially, I suppose, and then books and things like that, and TV shows, TV programs, documentaries. They want to give it a title that people remember. Anyway, the tweet that Martin says is, vis-a-vis Cheshire Police and the damage, the way they destroyed Sally Clark's life, and then now they just destroyed Lucy Letby's life and lied to all the families, or they've misdirected all the families and led them into a state of believing something that didn't actually happen at all. And what they may well have done in terms of these murders in Wilmslow in the 1990s is to allow either more than one murderer to get away with a double murderer, or potentially a serial killer to get away with 4 murders. And possibly there's others that might be connected to that person. That's I haven't watched it yet. I started watching it. I watched 5 minutes of it on the catch up on the computer. I don't know. It's just really. I used to watch a lot of so-called true crime, and I'm finding it harder and harder to do it. It's kind of when you get introduced to people's lives, and the beginning is the gentleman is mowing his lawn, and they say a little bit about the background of this one couple. As I say, I've only watched 5 minutes, and you think, oh God, well they were living a peaceful, steady, decent, nice, or decent, just a good life, and then horror visited them in the form of whomsoever. A demon visited them in human shape, or just a human that's an evil human being. And you can just feel it coming, and it's going to come. But it's set up with the idea, it's a nice day, and there's older gentleman's mowing the grass, and it's going to come. It's hard, isn't it, and I don't know, it seems to get to me more than it. I find it harder to watch it. But I've got the gist of it, obviously. But I might go back and watch it. Martin Pittman's tweet is saying, is there anything we can trust them with, Cheshire Police? Is there anything can we trust them to do anything right? That was the phrase he used. I think someone else said no. Neil Wilby, journalist, said no. And I said, no, absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then I went on a bit, rattled on a bit in the tweet, but I mean, whether I say that or not, they do exist as an organisation, and they're allegedly serving the public for the area that they work within, and there may be individuals that have found that individual police officers have done well by them, and they think well of them, and then there's the whole there's the whole concept, which is an obvious truism, that the police are just. I'm not saying they're us, but they're from the society. They're just from the people, aren't they? They're just people who have chosen to do that job. And where am I trying to get to? Why is it so bad? Why is it in these cases they're just so bad? But it's more than that. It would be one thing to be really bad at doing the job, and maybe in a lot of instances they've done it adequately, or in some cases really well, certain officers. But in these cases, it's so terrible what they've done with regard to first Sally Clark and then Lucy Letby. And in all likelihood, is multiple murders in Wilmslow in the 1990s. It's so bad. But the worst thing is that they don't want to put it right. That's what makes them unacceptable completely. That's what makes them beyond the pale, is that when it's shown to them and it's and they must know it's wrong. They have to know it's wrong in regard to Lucy Letby, and probably in regard to those murders, but they don't care. It's more important to them to, I'd say, protect their reputation, but the reputation's already gone. So why are you even bothering to protect something that's gone already? It's not there. You don't have it. You don't have a good reputation to protect. So what is it? And who decides that? Who's deciding on the policy to double down, to front it out? It's not every rank and file officer doing that. It's the people at the top. But maybe it's not just the people at the top. Maybe they're being directed to do that by who? The establishment, the government, elements in high up somewhere, I don't know who, possibly. Would that necessarily be the case? Would it need that? Would it need someone outside of them to be telling them to do that, or are they just totally capable of doing that on their own, off their own bat? In other words, doubling down, fronting it out. What is so totally unacceptable from them is, so I say them, so who is it? Well, it's everybody that's involved in that case, who's made money out of it by working on that case, and that's their job, and anyone associated with Hummingbird, and then the whole power structure above it in terms of that constabulary going to the chief constable, obviously, the line. So they've all got names. It's not the system. It's not an abstract. It's individuals with names, with titles, with ranks, with pensions coming up, with sort of honours of different kinds, probably, who've done all kinds of courses, apparently, in whatever. Perhaps could be members of certain organisations, maybe not. This idea of common purpose keeps cropping up. I'm not sure exactly what it is. Well, I've heard a few things about it. I'm still not clear about what it is, common purpose. Kind of a networking thing, kind of a training organisation, but who they are, what they are, I could look into it further. I don't know. At some level, it's getting really dull, because whatever you call it, whether it's that or the Freemasons or something else, it's just whatever it is, it's people in positions of control and influence within organisations behaving completely and utterly unscrupulously, and I would say criminally, to front it out and double down and do everything you can to ensure Lucy Letby stays in prison, trying to get extra charges laid against her when you know it's all wrong. They know it's wrong. They don't believe Lucy Letby is guilty of crimes. They don't need to. What they're protecting, they're not trying to protect the public from a serial killer getting out of prison, in their eyes. No. I don't believe that at all, not for a minute. They're protecting the fact that they went through a process, and within that so-called criminal justice system, it worked. It worked for them. It delivered. In other words, the jury said, yes, okay, you brought all this to us today. You've bombarded us with this stuff for 10 months. The defence is crap. Yeah, we're going to say, okay, guilty then. And then the police view that as a success. They see it as a success, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to them whether Lucy Letby is guilty or not. That's how cynical I believe it is. I think that of Bowen. I think that of Evans. I think that of Nick Johnson. I think that of Goss. I think that of all the consultants. They don't care, but they're all different versions of self-interest involved, very specific, bespoke sets of self-interest involved, obviously, in terms of the gang members from the Countess of Chester. It's all to do with their viability, if they're still working for the NHS, as carrying on as consultants, essentially. Can you imagine any of them working as consultants when Lucy Letby is exonerated? However, I think they probably will do, because that's the world we're in. And somebody like Gibbs would probably still try to end up being a priest. He's not a priest yet. He's trying to do it. It didn't work for Paula Venables of the post office. It didn't work, and he, and why would it work for her? How could it work for her? It's just inconceivable. When it came out, the role she played, so I don't think it can work for Gibbs. You'll have to knock that idea on the head eventually. The only way that he could turn it around is to come forward now and quit with the tiny guilt nonsense and just say to everybody, when I said tiny guilt, I meant I absolutely think Lucy Letby's innocent, if that's what he believes. But I think he believes that. I think they know it. I think they know it. I think they know that Evans is a nutter. They know it's all rubbish. They're all more experienced, or supposedly were more experienced than Evans, but that's not a high bar, That's not a high bar, because he's just... So I don't want to say things which are untrue. And when you're trying to get under the skin of something, a fake story, it's quite possible to end up going the other way, tipping the other way, and saying things which are not quite true. But you're trying to... It's all in the... Like I was saying before, it's all in the absence of having the other side, as it were, being open and honest with you. They're not going to do that. They're absolutely the opposite of being open and honest. They're totally dishonest. They're fronting it out. They're behaving like a mafia would, like a criminal gang would, like an individual criminal would in one of their interview rooms, saying no comment. When David Davis said he'd written to the chief constable, and the chief constable wrote back to him, said effectively saying, I don't want to talk to you, that's no comment. And when they did their petulant little statement recently, that's a kind of like, why are you picking on us kind of thing. We're fine, nothing, didn't answer anything. They don't believe that they should be held to account. They don't believe they should be held to account. So the mindset in those senior officers that's running Cheshire Police, and no doubt many other constabularies, is that they think they're above the law. They believe they're above the law. Now, whether anybody in Operation Hummingbird or in Cheshire Police as a whole would ever be charged or convicted with a crime under our legal system once Lucy Letby is exonerated, I don't know. But even if they never were, they are guilty of crimes, I believe, on a moral basis. They absolutely are. But they don't seem to care about that. In fact, they want to continue in that criminality. I don't want to call it criminality, whether somebody could bring it to court or not. It's still criminality, because they want an innocent person in prison for life to save their bacon, as they see it, to save their so-called reputation, which is in the toilet anyway, to cover up. And the truth about what they've done during that investigation is going to be many times worse than we've even had a hint of yet. Whether we'd actually... I know that obviously is supposition then, but I suspect it is. I suspect it is, in terms of collusion, and the collusion between Evans and the gang of doctors. That will be there somewhere, I believe. I suspect. I hope we can get some proof of that. I hope we can get some proof of that. It is out there somewhere. And it's out there in the knowledge of people, as it were. There are people out there that could tell us that, if it is indeed the case, and I think it is. I suspect it is. But even if that did all come out, it's as though they end up being untouchable. And I put another tweet out on I just said, there's a day coming in the future when there's going to be somebody from Cheshire Police, someone you'd never heard of before, particularly because they'll just use somebody that's anonymous essentially, but with a lot of rank and whatever, God knows what his title is, and he comes out to this bunch of microphones from the press and says, we want to extend our sincerest apologies to Lucy Letby and to the families, because Lucy Letby's been exonerated, and we want to assure the people of Cheshire that we've learned a lot of lessons, or we're going to learn lessons, and it'll all be somebody else will have written it in the PR department for him. He won't mean a word of it. None of it will be real. And that word reality is what I was trying to think of a bit of earlier, actually, that they are living in, there's something unreal about them, massively unreal about them in terms of it doesn't matter to them that these crimes haven't happened. What matters to them is that it went through a process in which, for a time, they believed themselves to be thought worthy of congratulation and awards, even for certain individuals. And it doesn't matter whether it's based on reality or not to them. They did it, they achieved it, they got it through, they got it over the line. It doesn't matter if what's inside that is complete and utter fiction and unreal, totally and utterly unreal. They can behave as though the unreal is still real because a system of power, a system called the criminal justice system, has underwritten it essentially by going through this process and having this goon Nick Johnson bully Lucy Letby and having a crap defence and it just being just a done deal really before the trial even started, and all the the vast majority of the media's whipped up into a bloodlust frenzy to titillate people and just get off on that. It's unreality, and that's where we see with so much actually, and that's why this idea about we mustn't damage the public's faith in the police or the criminal justice system. Well, why would you have any faith in it? Maybe some people do have faith in it if it's kind of worked for them, perhaps as a victim or whatever it is. Possibly. Maybe they do. I don't. I don't personally at all. And I don't, not only just on my own behalf, but clearly seeing all these instances in which, and there's been many over the years I've sort of looked at, and they don't learn anything. They've got no interest in learning any lessons at all. At all. And the same types of people keep falling upwards, and they're just useful, or they're like politicians. I'm talking about the people that end up as chief constables, usually. Maybe there are exceptions. But it's got to be a matter of policy, of them individually to say, no, we're closing ranks, we did it well, we did it right. We don't really care whether it's true, but we did it right. In other words, we ticked all these boxes. Hughes gives it away in the hummingbird video. He gives it away, and he does it so crassly and so awkwardly, and it's totally unbelievable. He says, well, you've got to say, well, we can get caught out because we say, well, you can't just look into one person or one thing, and we haven't just looked at one person, we haven't just looked at one thing. And he knows as he's saying it, that it's pouring out lies coming out of his mouth. He knows that. Everyone else that had any oversight from Cheshire Police knows that. Everyone within Hummingbird knows that. Everyone knows it's a lie. And here we come back to unreality. Do they believe their own lies? And they are liars. How can you have trust and faith in pathological liars like that? And why are they like that? And then people say, it came up a bit in the, I haven't watched it all yet, I watched 45 minutes of the interview with Dr. Wayne Squire with Chris on Lucy Letby analysis. And there's a very interesting exchange about where Dr. Squire says, well, they want to increase the number of convictions that they do, And then and Chris comes back about, but well, yeah, okay, well, it's got to be based on truth, though, isn't it? And there's a meeting of minds about that between them, in the conversation. That, yeah, clearly it should be, but clearly it isn't in reality. They don't actually, and that's another deliberate absolving themselves of the responsibility of living in reality. The reality should be, did this person commit a crime? Not, can we convict them, whether they did or didn't? And they're in the second mindset. And that means they're anti-justice, anti the law, anti-morality, and they're criminally minded, essentially, and happy to be so. Because when they put someone in prison and just make it happen and get it over the line to create their conviction, they're committing a crime doing that. Whether they'd ever be brought to book, they should be, but they never will. They never have been. And that's crucial. They never have been. So there's no fear. There's no fear that they'll be held to account. There's no fear that they'll be held to account for what they've done to Lucy or the families. None of them have any fear. They might not like what's going on. Conversely, with all the opprobrium that's being sent their way, they're probably feeling there's even probably a higher in-group preference than normal between people who work for Cheshire Police. They're probably getting some weird kind of high off it, saying, look how embattled and beleaguered we are against who? Well, they might even still believe the majority of the country is on their side and that they did a great job. But I'm not sure about that. They don't even dare tweet on the Twitter because they know what would be coming back at them. So they're embattled as they see it, but that might be conversely pulling them together and making them think, no, we're still the heroes here. We got each other's back. We're going to fight this out. We're going to front this out, and we're just going to carry on doing that. That is almost like a psychotic state of not being in touch with reality, but they're doing it through force in a sense. It's as though they can force their way of doing that. And the technique to force it is to not comply. In the same way that a criminal might not comply in any particular way. Although, having said that, if I was ever arrested, I wouldn't be complying in any way whatsoever. Obviously, I'm not going to try to physically fight the police because they'll just have more police there, They'll get you on the floor, they'll tase you, whatever they need to do. It's not about that, but I'm not going to cooperate with them any more than is humanly absolutely necessary, other than, but they don't feel obligated to have a conversation with a member of parliament, with the public, at all. So the stunning level of arrogance there mirrors the arrogance of Bowen, mirrors Liz Hull's arrogance, mirrors Evans's arrogance, mirrors the putrid arrogance of Nick Johnson. You don't have to behave like that as a prosecutor. You don't have to. Mirrors the arrogance of a goss, calling himself a judge. Or maybe that's we come to the nub of it, really, because that's why they've got to those jobs. I'm not saying every judge would be like that. I hope to God they're not, but it wouldn't surprise me if they could all be asked to be that way, and then they would deliver if necessary. The only exception is Judge John Deed, played by Martin Shaw. But as we know, he's fictional. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. Thanks for listening, and good night.